and welcome to All in the Words, the podcast for writers and storymakers in all their forms. In each episode, we explore a different corner of the writing world, from stage to screen, audio to novels, lyrics to scripts, with original pieces, creative conversations and toolkits for your process. Lee here, and in this episode we hear an interview that I recorded in December 2025 with Jacob Phillips, the Artistic Director of Codswallop CIC, but also the General Manager at Guiseley Theatre. All to come in this episode of All in the Words. Hello and welcome to the All in the Words podcast. I'm very pleased today to be joined by Jacob Phillips, who is the co-founder of arts company Codswallop CIC, but also the managing director of Guiseley Theatre. Hello, Jacob.
Hello.
Welcome to All in the Words.
Thank you very much.
So, you wear many hats.
Yes.
Quite literally.
I do wear many hats.
People know you for walking around Guiseley wearing your bowler hat most prominently.
Yep. That's my hat of choice, my go-to.
I want to get a little bit of background on you for those that don't know you. So we mentioned Codswallop CIC in the introduction, and you set that company up with your partner at the age of 18.
Yep.
I mean, it was under a different name then, but the ethos was still the same. So what was the thinking behind that?
So when I was in school, I spent most of my time making plays and putting on school concerts and messing around in the drama studio. Not really doing my schoolwork, but definitely being productive, just not in the way that my teachers wanted me to. And part of that included running the school drama club. Whilst I was in sixth form, we ran drama club for the year sevens, and I enjoyed doing that. The kids that were in the group enjoyed doing that. Then it came to me leaving school, and so I was like, hang on, I could probably carry on this drama club, but make a bit of money out of it and charge the kids to come. So that's what we did. We started the Oddballs School of Theatrical Extravaganzas, as it was called, in a room above a church, and that then turned into 2 drama clubs, which then turned into 3 drama clubs and a community choir and an over 60s group and a children's orchestra and a children's choir, and then activity days, family days, themed days, festivals. It absolutely snowballed.
So when you set up your company, was there a vision? And if so, what was that?
Yes, there was absolutely a vision, and the key thing that was all the way through it was I wanted it to be affordable. And I just thought, hang on, I think the key to being creative here is having fun, and that is something that I still believe now, thinking back. So fun-focused, participant-focused was always at the very heart of what we started to do back in 2013. We say process, not product, in Codswallop, where if the kids have had an absolute whale of a time putting on a show and they have learnt a lot and their confidence is built, or they've achieved something that they wouldn't have necessarily achieved otherwise, but the show that is put on isn't necessarily the highest quality or destined for the West End, that is the success that we are looking for. If they have a wonderful time and do something they've never done before, yada yada yada, and they happen to put on a fantastic show at the end of it, great. Fantastic. That's always the aim, but it's not the priority. And so I started doing that as JP Productions, and we had a very boring black and white logo. I was 18 years old. I was determined for people to take me seriously, so I went very professional and very businesslike. And then after 3 or 4 years, it just became this massive movement of community and theatre and working with children as young as 5 and then adults in their 80s and everybody in between, and it just became something so big we were like, okay, we need to incorporate into something. And so at that point we were like, okay, what are we actually about and who are we? We knew our identity by that point. We were like, we're not boring and serious business people, this is what we are. Codswallop, nonsense, we're here to have fun, and that's how Codswallop came into being. And it's been non-stop since then, basically.
Now, Codswallop plays a significant part in our local community. Was that always the intention?
So every performance we've ever done has been pay what you can, and I think that is absolutely rooted in the grassroots. Like this, what we are doing is for the community. We are not there to take excessive amounts of money out of their wallets. We used to put out buckets and say, please just put what you can. And I watched people put 10p piece in, but I also watched people put an envelope with a cheque for a couple of hundred in there. So we always broke even doing pay what you can, which was fantastic. And I think that was because people really valued what we were doing. So when we first started, there wasn't much going on in Guiseley. I wouldn't have thought. People have said to us that they were looking to move out of the area because there wasn't much going on, and then they discovered Codswallop and chose to stay in the area. I've had people say they've moved into the area specifically for Codswallop, which is absolutely bonkers that people have chosen to live in this town because we like messing around in a room in Guiseley Theatre. But I do really think that people need community, and for us to create a vessel for community to happen, like for us it's dressing up and being silly, maybe some stuff in a field, some fireworks and some drumming workshops and some drama or a theatre. That's just the vessel that community happens to take the form, because that's what I'm and Codswallop's passionate about. And it just needed that initial, right, this is what we're doing, get on board or don't, basically, and then the community formed around it.
So through the work that you do as Codswallop, part of your programme of delivery is the Tales Told Festival. Can you tell us a bit about that and how that came about?
Yes, it's funny you should ask this, actually, because we are just debating what Tales Told 2026 is going to look like. So we've taken a year off Tales Told this year because we've had a little baby and she is divine, and putting on the festival is big. So it's been a bit of a hiatus for us. But Tales Told initially started as a community arts and heritage festival. I've always been fascinated by the history of Guiseley. There's like 5 generations of my family here. I really loved being in primary school and looking at the old registers. I loved walking past all the old buildings and the mills, and at the time there was a lot of antisocial behaviour, and it was just clear that people didn't understand what was on the doorstep. They didn't appreciate the history that was there. And so we were like, okay, well, let's put on a festival telling tales of the town. And so Tales Told was where it came from. And highlighting bits of history, celebrating, yes, what has passed, but also what's here now. One that comes to mind was one year we did industry, so we spent ages looking at all the mills and what they all made in Guiseley. But then we also did a brilliant photo and interview series, and we went to all the independent businesses in Guiseley, took photos of the business owners, asked them some questions, recorded the conversation, and played that back in an exhibition space alongside the businesses from the 1800s. So it's just a really nice comparison between the two. And it's just about celebrating what we've got, the community that's here and the heritage, in the hope that people look at their streets and think, wow, these streets have been here for years, they've survived years, and now it's my turn to look after these streets so that they are here for years to come. And just building that a bit of appreciation. And I think that was really successful. But yes, we did exhibitions, but we also did drum workshops and tried to recreate the soundscapes that we might have found in the mills using samba drums. That was really exciting. The kids loved that. We did Tales from the Mills, which you've referred to, where we interviewed people that used to work in the mills and then created a script using their words and then passed it to actors for them to perform. And that was really lovely. Just using creativity to bring local history alive. That was Tales Told. And that's just 1 week in a year. It was one project of what we did overall. But it became a bit of a flagship. And part of it was a community cafe and doing workshops and an exciting programme of events. So I think back when we first started Tales Told, we were doing, I think it was 39 events in 7 days, which was exhausting. And it was me and Lucy, the other half of Codswallop, literally kicking people out the door from one workshop and moving into a different room to start another workshop, rapid fire. And so that was the intention behind Tales Told. And now I think we started in 2016, so we are going into 10 years of Tales Told, and we had a community cafe, based at Guiseley Theatre, Now we've opened a cafe at Guiseley Theatre, so that aspect has become permanent. We had a programme of events happening every day. Well, now we've got a programme of events happening every day. And so the questions we're asking ourselves is, what is left of Tales Told to make it a festival rather than just life at Guiseley Theatre? So that's a really long-winded way of saying it's heritage, it's a family, it's a festival. What it's going to look like in 2026, I don't know, because it's happening every day now, which is really, really nice place to be. Just people aren't aware. Like, we would set up the cafe and we put flags outside. It's Tales Told this week. Whereas now the cafe's already there. Aside from putting the flags out, what are we going to do to make it a Tales Told week?
Well, that's a lovely legacy that you have created in the town of Guiseley. Just to mention about the Tales from the Mills. So if you've not listened to them already, there are episodes of this podcast where we are performing the monologues that formed part of that performance piece, just so you can get a sense of what life was like for people who were living today, but who were working in the mills, right, 40, 50 years ago. So yeah, check out those episodes if you can. You've mentioned a lot about Guiseley Theatre.
Yes.
Now, you're the managing director there now.
Yes.
And that is the home of Codswallop.
Yes.
But how did all that come about?
Okay. So, Codswallop started in a room above a church, and then it started to grow, so we needed more space. So we contacted Guiseley Theatre. And at that point, it was functioning very much like a village hall. There were a few classes every week, and then maybe shows twice a year. A beautiful Victorian building. We were like, okay, they've got a nice sizable room. It was relatively cheap to hire. We'll move some of our classes there, and then we could do some back-to-back or whatever. So we started running our classes there, created a bit of a base for ourselves there, but we were just hiring the room on a weekly basis. So we were like, well, we're here a lot running our classes. Why don't I lock up the building on this day? Because I'm the last one in. Will that be helpful? And they're like, yeah, that'll be helpful. Okay. Started doing that. And then we're like, hey, do you want to come join the committee? So we joined the committee. And then, again, similar to Codswallop, for various reasons, the theatre needed to incorporate. So it came to the decision of, okay, who's going to form the board of the CIC? And I was on that initial board. And so basically I just joined at the right time. Helped them. I was like, this is a diamond in the rough, guys. You've got a stage here. Let's put stuff on there every week. And it's turned into what it is today.
Which is a fundamental hub of the community of Guiseley.
Yeah, it is. It is absolutely a community hub. So we've just put our 10-year business plan together. We formed the CIC in 2019 with the intention of 2020 being the year for Guiseley Theatre. Obviously, that didn't happen. So, 2020 to now, or earlier this year, has been basically just get people through the door by any means possible, keep the income coming, and survive, basically. Whereas now we're like, okay, what were our plans in 2019? Where do we see ourselves being in the next 10 years? Actually, it's a really good time to have that conversation now, because it's a very different conversation to what we would have been having in 2019, because we've got a whole different board with different skill sets, different passions, different priorities, and it's really exciting. So, and this is where the overlap is happening between Codswallop and the theatre. There's Codswallop, which is all about community and creating, and yes, we're based at Guiseley Theatre, but we can set up in a park or we can set up in a field, and we're all about making the arts accessible. Now, yes, the influence of me being on the board and the people joining the board are very similar-minded, but that idea of bringing the arts to the community is very much in Guiseley Theatre's aims, as well as Codswallop's now. It's just Guiseley Theatre is tied to the building, and its main priority is maintaining a building and ensuring that the building is there for another 160 years.
So as the managing director, what does that involve?
I never intended to be the managing director. Codswallop and making and creating and performing is absolutely what I intended to do, but through doing that and helping out at Guiseley Theatre, I've somehow ended up emailing building control for the last week about trying to fit a new door, or planning permissions and fire alarm testing and the logistics of running a building, alongside working with the team to put programming together and designing the what's-ons and making sure that the building is functioning. So this, if you'd asked me what I was going to be doing at 18 years old, this is not what I thought I'd be doing. I'm very much enjoying it. It is stressful at times, but I am very much learning as I've never done building control before, but I can tell you the inner workings of how to fit a front door now, because that's what the last 6 months have taken up on my time. And even just the fact that it takes 6 months to get a new front door, and we've still not got the front door. So my job as managing director, I am on the board of directors of the CIC, but I'm also running the theatre day to day, and I'm the link between the board and the operations of the building. Part of the 10-year plan is to separate my role into operations and artistic director, and I will pass on the baton of the building control and the maintaining the building to somebody else, and I can focus on programming theatre and arts and making sure that the building is absolutely used to its full potential. We've got an ambition to be a learning theatre, so I'm starting conversations with universities about placements, and we want to create a formal qualification through people using the building. We want to be a green theatre. We've got this brilliant document, and it's on the internet. Go and have a look at it. But it's my job to deliver that in between putting out chairs, painting walls, and mopping floors and whatnot. So in the future, it'll be less operations and more making sure the building is there to be used and create, and that somebody else can make sure it functions.
You mentioned that it's been a steep learning curve, and you mentioned that it's been a lot of fun on the way. What would you say have been the highlights?
So me and Lucy, we're very visual people. It's like when we're putting on a show and we're reading the script, I can see it in my head. I know what's going to be on stage, and I know what the lighting's going to look like, and the process of that and bringing that to life is really exciting. On a theatre point of view, like we opened the cafe 2 months ago, and we've known we wanted to do that since, well, before the CIC was even formed, and we knew what we wanted it to look like. And same again, like 2 years ago, we opened up the bar space. We knew what that we wanted to look. So we've got these visuals in our head, and every time they become reality, it's like, okay, we've made a step forward here. Fantastic. And each time we do that, the steps become more ambitious, which is really exciting. And like, so to begin with, it was just like putting some new paint on the walls, and that was a massive step. It looked the same way for the last 50 years, and being able to convince people that redecoration was needed. And not only redecoration, but redecoration in some quite bold colours was needed. And as soon as we'd done that, everyone's like, yes, look at this. It's a place with character now. There's not a single bit of grey or magnolia in sight, which is the way I like it. But so now our grand plans involve knocking things down and building extensions, and when they come to fruition, I'm like, there, okay, that's what we've been planning for the last, well, by the time they happen, it'll be 20 years. And that's the really exciting thing.
Right, so you've talked about the artistic stuff that you'd like to see happening at the theatre,
yeah,
and that you are a very, very visual person,
yeah,
in how you plan things and develop things. You've got two hats on here. As the artistic director of Codswallop CIC, you are a producer of plays.
yeah.
As the managing director of Guiseley Theatre, part of your remit is the programming. So I want to explore those two avenues. But let's talk about Codswallop first. So as a producer of theatre, what motivates you? What inspires you? What do you like to create?
The thing I really enjoy doing is spectacles. I really like creating a moment where the audience goes, wow. And that's the moment that they go home and they talk about, particularly with kids' theatre. There's no limits on that. So the first thing that comes to mind is our Christmas show 2019. It was called Molly and Madeline, the Christmas Stowaways. About two young girls who, when Santa comes to drop off presents at their house, they sneak into his sack and end up at the North Pole. They meet the elves, and the elves are like, oh dear, well, the only way to get home is to ride the Northern Lights. So we created the Northern Lights in the theatre. And that was a really great moment. So in the script, it's just, the elves, they're saying, you have to go home through the Northern Lights. And the girls go, oh, okay. Then the script says something like, then they go home through the Northern Lights. And then it's the next scene. And that one line is a 6-minute sequence. And it's the most expensive 6 minutes of the whole show. It's what we've invested all the time and the energy, because that's the moment that people are going to remember. And we strung fabric on pulleys so that it came out over the audience. It was all like neon-y, beautifully lit. There were wind machines to make it flap around. We strapped the actors to bungee cords, and they jumped out over the audience but under the fabric, and then landed back on the stage. It was a really intense but absolutely stunning moment. That is one line in a script, and being on stage at that time, waiting for... I'm trying to remember how it happened, in what order it happened, whether the actors jumped or whether it was the fabric, but there was one moment every night, and you're there, you're just trying to make sure all the strings are in the right place. It's absolutely manic on stage. Everybody's trying to make this 6 minutes happen. The actors that are strapped to the bungees are distracting the audience whilst we're going, who's got that, who's got that? And then in the middle of that, you've just got that moment where the audience all collectively gasp and go, whoa! And that's the moment. We try and have a moment like that in each show. And essentially, that's the big moment. There are lots of little moments in between that, and the script's a bit of a vessel to get from sequence to sequence, spectacle to spectacle, and really create the magic. Like, people walk into Guiseley Theatre expecting a Christmas show, and the last thing they expect to do is forget they're in Guiseley Theatre, and in that moment, they are in the Northern Lights, flying with these people over their heads, and I think that's really great. And it's almost a shame at the end of the show to break that magic. This year we're going to space. There's some pretty spectacular things coming. So yeah, we try and create a spectacle. That's what I like to do, creating spectacles. And whether that is a big show on the main stage, or whether we try and do something a little bit more intimate, there's always that moment that's like, okay, this is special. And I think that's what makes a Codswallop show.
So as a theatre maker, what is it that inspires you?
I love doing kids' theatre, and I think the key to successful kids' theatre is having regular contact with children. So, like, we run our youth theatres and our drama groups, and just being able to keep up to the latest lingo. They're all saying 6-7 at the moment. I don't know what that means, but as soon as you say 6-7, the whole room erupts. Anyway, I think talking to kids. Talk to kids. That's the biggest thing I can say. And sometimes I'll watch children's theatre and I'm like, okay, but yeah, it's a lovely story and it looks very pretty and the actors are telling their story, but have you spoken to a kid? Find out what they like, what do they need to be hooked into a show. And I think we're quite good at that because we are constantly talking to kids and attuned to it. And I think with kids, you've got to give them more credit than... you don't have to spell everything out for them. They're very good at deducing things themselves. So there's a brilliant book called I Want My Hat Back by John Classen. It's a kid's book. It's my favourite book of all time. It's about a bear who loses his hat and he wants his hat. He finds his hat and in the end, a rabbit had it. All the way through the book, he's asking different animals where they think his hat. He asks the rabbit, where do you think my hat is? Have you seen my hat? And the hat is clearly on the rabbit's head. And he's like, I don't know where your hat is. Don't ask me any more questions. Then at the end of the book, he's like, you've got my hat. And then the next page is just the bear wearing his hat. And he's like, I love my hat. And then another animal comes along and says, excuse me, have you seen a rabbit? And he's like, no, I've not seen a rabbit. I certainly didn't eat the rabbit. Don't ask me any more questions. And then my favourite thing to do so if I'm reading the book to a room full of kids, is go, where do you think the rabbit is? And some of them are like, oh, maybe he's gone on holiday. or he's hiding behind the rock. And then some are like, that bear's eating the rabbit. And I love that little giving kids opportunity to interpret things how they want it to be. You can get away with a lot more, basically.
But also, this kind of blurs into the other role that you have as the managing director of Guiseley Theatre.
Yeah.
In terms of like going out and finding productions to programme into the theatre. So I know that you go to the Edinburgh Festival every opportunity that you can. What is it that you're looking for when you go to see plays there?
Yeah. So Edinburgh is, well, all Fringe festivals are a really good opportunity to see theatre. Usually what happens is we just get an email with a tour pack. And if I'm being brutally honest, the make or break decision is how good the poster is. Because if it's a naff poster, it's not going to bring an audience in. It doesn't matter if it's the best show in the world. If the poster's not great, you've got to be able to sell it. So that is, in a normal, non-Edinburgh way, it's all on the poster. And if the show sounds really good, but the poster's naff, we'll say, sounds great, but you need to work on your poster. I know other venues that we'll refuse to have a conversation until they've gone to a different designer to have their poster redone. Fringe festivals, however, like Edinburgh, are great because you are there and there is so much happening and you can walk from venue to venue and you don't really look at the poster. You just go, what can I see right now? Or are you looking at the descriptions? The posters are like a tiny square, and you just book as much as you possibly can, and you try and see a year's worth of work in a week. And that's a really exciting way to do it. So this year we went specifically looking for kids' theatre because in 2026 Guiseley Theatre's hosting a family arts festival. So we were like, okay, we need to find work here. And it's fantastic. And I think particularly in Edinburgh, if you are creating a show that's not for kids, there's this desire to be hard-hitting or cut through the rest, to leave the audience feeling something. Whereas there's none of that with kids' theatre. The focus is just having a good time, inspiring kids, and just creating a different world. And I think that is why I'm drawn to it.
So what kind of shows have stuck in your mind from your time at Edinburgh?
A lovely piece we saw was called Hello Birds, which is coming to the Children's Festival next year. And this is the other thing with kids' theatre. The rules go out the window. Like this, that there isn't a stage necessarily. It doesn't have to be a stage. There doesn't have to be necessarily even actors. But this piece, Hello Birds, was absolutely beautiful. The space we were in did have a stage, but all the kids were sat on the stage around this big blanket, and the blanket was a garden, and there was a storyteller sat on the stage and a puppeteer, and they just took us for a walk through the garden in this shipping container in a park in Edinburgh, and different animals came out. They were all birds, and we talked about the birds, and the kids got to play with the birds, got to splash in the puddles. It was just this whole different world. And if the kids took the story in a different direction, the storyteller adapted. And I thought that was really beautiful. It was really sensory. It was really beautiful. So bringing that to Guiseley next year. We saw another piece called Dream Space, which was a Korean puppet show. It was non-verbal. There was lots of grunting and sighing and gestures being made.
Sound effects.
Sound effects, yes. And mumbling, lots of mumbling, but no script as such. And I don't know if that's because they created it in Korea and they were bringing it to Edinburgh. Don't know. But that was beautiful as well and really tight. And then another piece we saw, again, non-verbal. Didn't have any noise in it at all other than some nice music behind it, and it was called Tube, and it was an actor in a play tube, and it was just watching this tube creature interact with the space. And we were there with a 1-year-old. Absolutely, that was her favourite show, just the noises, and they had
mesmerised by it.
Yeah, bought into it.
See, it's really interesting because this podcast is called All in the Words, and it's all about writing in its many forms. But what you're saying there actually is that sometimes you don't need to use words; it's the visuals.
Yeah.
But actually, someone's still got to write the story.
Yes.
And the direction. So,
and I suppose this is we spent a lot of time talking about this when we wrote Freckle and Speckle's Christmas Calamity, and there was a scene where Freckle met a polar bear, and they had a long conversation. And in the end, we were like, actually, I don't think this polar bear needs to speak at all. And a lot can be said with silence, I think. There was interaction between Freckle and the polar bear. The polar bear, in the end, just hiccuped occasionally. And Freckle did speak at the polar bear, and you could see the polar bear thinking, oh, wish this guy would shut up. But I think that scene became more successful as we took more words out of it. And I think when we're creating shows nowadays, a lot of the sequences are born out of that. We are progressing the story massively through showing and through music and showing the audience what is happening. And we're only really using the words when they're really, really necessary.
It's really interesting, though, because like as someone who writes, the rule of thumb is kind of like a page a minute. So a page of dialogue is a minute's worth of, particularly in film and TV. Yeah. So when you're writing a script and it comes out that it's only 35 pages long, but trusting that the visual aspects of it are going to make it last an hour and 20, you know, it is a bit of a leap of faith as a writer to trust that that's how it's going to be. And, you know, for me as the writer, it's also a learning curve that I've been going on, because I'm naturally drawn to writing dialogue.
Yeah, whereas I think I'm the opposite of not. So when I wrote The Garden, which was a play about 4 kids playing in the garden, and the posters were all really twee, but then when you watch the show, the kids are convinced that the elderly couple living next door are actually axe murderers. And so that was only 21 pages long, but the show was 45 minutes, and I knew that 21 pages was enough. And I knew I wanted it to be between 45 minutes and an hour, but I knew that we were working with a musician at the time who was playing on the piano, and we were going to have these sequences. And there were moments where the piano player played the character of one of the kids' parents who was a piano teacher, which is just basically an excuse for having a piano in the room. But it was really fantastic having this live backing that could match the mood and the feel of the audience, and I knew that, okay, so the script's, 20 minutes, and then there'll be another 25 minutes of music where we're setting traps, or music where we're racing each other on their bikes, or building a garden, or introducing the animals in the garden. So for me, it always starts with a spectacle, and then the words come later. I suppose for you, it always starts with the words, and then see what happens with the spectacle.
So in terms of that process then, as a writer,
yeah,
and you as a theatre maker,
yeah,
how much detail would you want in a script for what's happening visually?
As in, like, stage directions?
Yeah, or just even painting the picture of, like, you mentioned with Molly and Madeline that it was one line that said they ride the Northern Lights home.
Yeah. Probably to a writer's disgruntlement, disregard most stage directions. When I'm reading a script, I don't read the stage directions. And I don't know if that comes from doing some work in Shakespeare where there isn't any stage direction and you're forced to think, or I just think, if I'm going to put my mark on it, I'm going to make this more interesting, or I'm going to create a bit more of a spectacle, give me the words and then I'll fill in the rest, basically. Okay, so what comes to mind is when we did Our Day Out, which was
as a play by
Willie Russell. And that was the last non-original show we did, but the second show we did as Codswallop. And it was the first time we had a big cast as well. So, for instance, in there, they go to the zoo and they steal a load of rabbits and chickens and petting animals, basically, which I didn't think was particularly interesting. So in our version, you get onto the bus and then you find that we had loads and loads of puppets, and there's all these kids looking really guilty, and then a giraffe pops up from behind them, and an elephant and a snake, and they brought all of the animals from the zoo. And I think that was the end. So the whole zoo sequence, we brought all the animals. It was a bit Lion King, you know, where they come through the audience, and there were massive puppets. It was a good 18-foot giraffe, and that was the big spectacle moment of the show. And it got a round of applause spontaneously quite a few times. That's not in the script, but we thought, right, we'll put this bit of music in there. We'll bring these animals out. We'll create a spectacle, and then the finale of that sequence is the reveal on the bus where these animals pop out from behind the seats. And that was the moment that the audience will remember, but in the script it's, so-and-so's got a rabbit in his jacket. So I don't look at the stage directions, not necessarily. I would rather just have the words, what are the characters actually going to say, and then we'll take it from there. And I suppose as Codswallop, it's a little bit different, because we talk about what the sequences are before you start writing the script. So coming up with those sequences is where, like for Christmas, I knew we wanted a moon and we wanted to reveal the moon. The story was built around the reveal of the moon. So a lot of Christmas shows will start with me lying on the floor in the living room, listening to Spotify really loudly with my eyes closed, just trying to visualise what could happen. With Molly and Madeline, there was this issue of how are they going to get home. At that point, I'm lying on the floor. We put on Sweet Disposition, which ended up being the reference track for Martha to create. And whilst listening to that full blast...
Sorry, Martha's the composer that you...
Yes. So that was the reference track we gave Martha, but whilst lying there on the living room floor, eyes closed, music blaring, I'm like, okay, I can see it now. Obviously, they fly through the Northern Lights. Obviously, we're going to have to recreate Northern Lights, and that is the moment where it all comes together, and that's where it all starts with the music, I think.
So I'm just thinking, like, we talked about the work that you've produced in the past and then your process of bringing the plays to life,
Yeah.
the process of writing the original pieces, your preferences for theatre for young people and children. What is the vision for Codswallop going forward? Where do you see yourself being in 10 years' time?
So when Codswallop started, that took up most of my time, and the theatre was a side project to help. Whereas now, trying to balance the two, the theatre is taking up so much of my time, and I think that is where the future is. Codswallop funding is always an issue. It's project by project. It's not a salaried thing. So Codswallop's company in residence at Guiseley Theatre, which I think it just helps me swap those hats a little bit. I would love to see Codswallop delivering the community engagement for Guiseley Theatre in a really well-funded, beautiful, everybody's happy, finances are not an issue world. Whether that is the case, I don't know. I'd love to still be making shows, but again, whether Codswallop continues making family theatre and then as artistic director of Guiseley Theatre we make more young people shows. So it's definitely, we're here, we're not going anywhere, just trying to figure out how the two don't accidentally become the one, if that makes sense.
So you're saying about Guiseley Theatre and maybe being a producer of plays for an older audience. In terms of programming, how do you see that evolving?
This is what my big job for 2026. So since COVID, I would say a vast majority of what we are putting on at Guiseley Theatre is tribute acts. People like Elton John, they like singing along to Elton John, so they know, they trust that if they spend that money on that ticket, they're going to have a good time. They know what they're going to expect. But we are a theatre. So my mission is to put on more theatre. I would love to see Guiseley Theatre producing 2 in-house shows a year. So a lot of the theatre we have at the moment is just one-night shows. I would like to get to the point where we are having a week-long run.
Of visiting productions or in-house productions?
Either or, maybe even a month-long. So with Christmas shows, we're at 3 weeks running. Not every day, but the show gets in, and then 3 weeks later it gets out. That just makes life easier for us. I'd like to get to that point a couple of times a year. Historically, the building's had a lot of Amdram in it. I'd like to see the return of that, I think. I think that's an important part of the community. And they are able to run for a week because they typically have big casts and their families live very locally, so they can, whereas professional shows, not always local actors, and you've got to sell the tickets organically, basically, rather than out of duty. So basically, my vision is that by we get to 2027, it'll be a much more creative programme of chosen plays as opposed to what happens to land in my inbox, and plays that we are creating in-house. We're going to create a template, basically, that we're going to follow. And I'm hoping that things like a Children's Theatre Festival will become an annual feature in the calendar. Tales Told already is. So being a bit more decisive on what we are putting on, and so one of our aims is to create a role in the theatre of community engagement, and using that position to engage with the community, but also make them aware of what's going on, and that these shows are put on for them, and just integrate the community into the building, basically, whether that be as an audience member or whether it is a member of a group or a volunteer or whatever.
So in the description for this episode, I'll be putting links through to Guiseley Theatre for Codswallop. If someone who is listening was interested in exploring the potential of having a production that they have produced put on at Guiseley Theatre, what would they do? How would they go about that?
Well, just drop us an email to begin with. Start the conversation, info@guiseleytheatre.org. When I transition into artistic director rather than managing director, what I really want to do is support new work and new companies, and I would love to get to the point where we are saying, right, you can have this room for a week to rehearse in, R&D, whatever, but at the end of it you do a show for us and we'll take the ticket money, and then you can go off and tour. So you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours, basically. Because we've got a fantastic venue and we want to be there for people to use, but at the moment the priority is paying the heating bill and fixing the windows and things like that. We're just not in a position to be able to offer rooms for free at the moment. However, I'm hoping down the line we can be that resource for people. And I really do want to see new work. I think that's important. We do a lot of pre and post fringe stuff at the moment where people are coming to just test the waters with. That seems to go down really well, but again, it's only one night and it doesn't attract a massive audience.
So with that in mind, you're talking about the community engagement officer and using that as a springboard, as an opportunity to create new work. Can you tell us a bit more about that vision?
When I say we want to do 2 in-house productions a year, eventually we'd love to see 4 in-house productions a year, but one of them we've earmarked as being a community production where we have a community ensemble working alongside professional actors, similar to what we did for On Hallowed Ground, where we told the story of the local football club, basically, and we had the local football fans as part of the ensemble telling their own story, which was really great. And that, similar to Tales Told, is telling stories that are for people on their doorstep. They've seen themselves on stage. And in that show, we're talking about a very specific period of time in the football club where they went to Wembley. They won?
They went to Wembley for the FA Vase, and that match was a draw. So then the rematch, unfortunately, they lost.
But whilst we were doing that show, some of the footballers that our actors were pretending to be were in the audience. And so it wasn't even a case of we've changed the names and faces of these people to protect. It was, we are pretending to be you on the stage right now. And I think that was really good and really nice. And obviously the people in the audience who were the football fans knew these people already. They were like big heroes in the football club. So it's telling the stories that are on the doorstep again. And I think using the people who the stories are about as the community cast is a really empowering thing for them. They were absolutely buzzing after the project and were like, when are we doing the next one? When are we doing the next one? So I'd like to see that kind of project. And I always say it's called Guiseley Theatre, but really it should be called Guiseley's Theatre. It was bestowed to the people of the inhabitants of Guiseley forever. It belongs to them. It's to tell their stories. That's what we're about. And in the meantime, we'll put Until John on the stage.
Cool. Well, I think we're kind of coming to the end of our time together. But it's been really interesting to hear about not just the journey and the future plans of Codswallop as a producer of theatre, but also the big picture plans for Guiseley Theatre as a beacon in our community. It's very exciting to see what the next 10 years are going to bring. Yeah,
it is very exciting, and it's nice to have it written down now and being able to say, guys, this is what we're working towards, rather than I think it's very easy to look like we're not progressing, like trying to put a door in for 6 months. I told people we're putting a new door in 6 months ago, and we still not got a new door. But actually, that's because we're ticking all the boxes and whatnot. So being able to have that document saying this is what we're working towards constantly, it's really great. And in 10 years' time, it is going to be the bee's knees of theatres. Yeah, it's going to be great. There's a need for it now, which is the frustrating thing. Because I'm like, so I'm talking to other people in other theatre companies. I'm like, what you need right now, I'm trying to deliver. You just got to give me a decade, please. Thank you. Come back to me in 10 years. If people are interested in finding out more about Guiseley Theatre and also the work of Codswallop, then, as I said earlier, the links will be in the description for this podcast. And you can always follow the antics of Codswallop and also to know what's going on at Guiseley Theatre by following their Instagram profiles. Again, I'll put a link in the description. Thank you so much for your time. It's been really good to hear about the work that you've been doing and the plans that you have. And hopefully we'll see people crossing the threshold. And also, we might be starting the Guiseley Theatre, not a podcast. That will be more conversation about the theatre and what's coming up and the processes that we're going through on a more regular basis, if that's what you're interested in. Excellent. Thank you very much for your time. More than welcome. Thanks for joining me on this episode of All in the Words. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe, rate and share, and join the conversation over on the All in the Words Instagram profile.
You can find any links and episode extras on the podcast website, allinthewords.podbean.com. Until next time, keep writing, because it's not just craft, it's all in the words.